Tama Raukara had always been the quiet one. In the misty town of Rotorua, surrounded by steaming geysers and whispering forests, his presence was more like a shadow than a storm. He was the kind of teenager who arrived home before dark, answered questions with a respectful, "Yes, uncle," and never raised his voice, even when he wanted to scream. His wana, proud descendants of Ngati Wakau, kept to the old ways. Discipline, tradition, and honor guided every word and action. For Tama, that meant early morning karakia, helping Nana with weaving, and never, absolutely never, challenging the rules of the house. But something had shifted lately. Maybe it was the late-night music blasting from his cousin Manaya's phone, or the posters of a reggae festival in Wellington taped inside school lockers. Or maybe it was the way the world outside seemed to vibrate with freedom, while his own life sat wrapped in layers of silence and expectations. One Thursday evening, as twilight turned the sky a deep charcoal, Tama overheard his classmates planning. The road trip. The concert. No parents. Just music, laughter, and open roads. Rebels unite. Someone had called it with a grin. Tama chuckled softly, unseen behind the rugby shed. He wasn't one of them. He didn't rebel. He obeyed. He endured. But that night, lying on his thin mattress with the scent of eucalyptus drifting through the slats of the wooden floor, something twisted in his gut. He imagined the bus lights fading into the distance, the sounds of live music echoing in the capital, and himself, still here, folding laundry with Nana, his fists clenched. What if just this once he didn't? The idea clung to him like steam from the thermal pools. It followed him to school, to the werpaku, and even to the kitchen table, where his father recited wakataki in that deep, thunderous voice. Tama wasn't listening. Not really. He was somewhere else, somewhere loud, bright, and pulsing with life.
He didn't know how. Not yet.
But he was going. By Friday morning, Tama had made up his mind. He didn't say a word about it, of course. Silence was second nature. But beneath his school uniform, folded carefully over his frame like a disguise, his pulse thrummed like the beat of a haka drum. The reggae festival was 2 days away. The plan was simple, or reckless, depending on who you asked. Manaya, his older cousin who'd been held back a year and was always half in trouble, had a rusted blue Toyota Uda. It ran on prayers and petrol money scavenged from couch cushions. But it could make it to Wellington if it didn't break down in Taupo. "You sure about this?" Manaya asked during lunch, shoving a half-eaten pie into his mouth. Tama didn't answer straight away. He just looked out at the field, where boys shouted and tackled each other under a wide sky.
Free.
Untouchable. "I'm coming," he said finally. Manaya raised an eyebrow. "I? The golden boy." Tama didn't respond. That night, he packed a small bag. One hoodie. One change of clothes. $46 in crumpled notes. And a printed ticket for the festival Manaya had bought under a fake name. He left the bag in the bushes behind the shed. On Saturday morning, he told his father he had a school project and would be at the library all day. His father just nodded. Tama walked toward the bus stop, heart pounding. But halfway there, he ducked into a side street and sprinted toward the edge of town, where Manaya was waiting. The Toyota roared to life with a stubborn cough. And just like that, they were gone. Rotorua faded into the rearview mirror, swallowed by fog and trees. The road was long, winding, and utterly unfamiliar. They passed Lake Taupo at sunset, its surface like hammered copper beneath a sky set ablaze. They stopped briefly to fill up the Uda with the last of their coins, sharing a cold bottle of fizzy drink and a bag of crisps. Manaya talked most of the way. About music. Girls. Dreams of leaving New Zealand behind and flying to Melbourne. He had that way about him, like everything was possible, even if nothing was planned. Tama listened. Said little. But inside, something was starting to loosen. Around midnight, the Uda's engine hiccuped. Manaya cursed and thumped the dashboard. "We're gonna need a miracle," he muttered. They pulled into a petrol station near Leven. The air smelled like oil and fried food. It was the kind of place where time felt paused. Manaya disappeared to ask for directions. Tama waited in the shadows, pulling his hoodie over his head. Then a police car rolled in. Tama froze. Two officers stepped out, laughing, unaware of the boy holding his breath behind a vending machine. He could hear his heart louder than the engine. Manaya returned, unfazed, tossed him a meat pie. "Come on," he said. "Wellington's not far now." They arrived in Wellington just after 3 in the morning. The capital was alive, even at that hour. Neon signs blinked sleepily, taxis cruised empty streets, and music spilled from half-shut club doors. It was nothing like Rotorua. Tama had never seen so many strangers in one place. Everyone looked like they belonged. Everyone moved like they were going somewhere. He felt invisible and strangely free. They parked near Cuba Street, where the festival would be held later that day. No money for a hostel. No friends nearby. So they slept in the Uda, windows cracked, listening to the hum of a city that didn't care who they were or where they came from. In the morning, they cleaned up in a public restroom, brushed their teeth with bottled water, changed clothes behind trees. Tama looked at himself in the mirror. Something about him had shifted. He couldn't name it, but he felt it. Manaya clapped him on the shoulder. "You ready?" Tama nodded. For the first time in his life, he actually was. The festival was everything they imagined, and more. People danced in the streets. The scent of jerk chicken, spices, and sweat filled the air. Flags from islands across the Pacific waved overhead. A band played under the sunlight, dreadlocks bouncing in rhythm. Tama had never been in a crowd like this. He lost Manaya almost instantly. But he didn't panic. He let the music carry him, joined in a circle of dancers, laughed when someone handed him a mango smoothie. His feet moved with the beat, arms raised to the sky, a wild joy pulsing through him. He wasn't Tama, the obedient son. Not here. He was just another teenager.
Sweaty.
Smiling.
Alive.
As the sun dipped low, a slow groove took over. A singer on stage told stories of rebellion, of heritage, of breaking chains. Tama felt every word. He didn't know how long he stood there listening. Hours, maybe. But when Manaya found him again, his cousin stared like he'd seen a ghost. "You alright, bro?" Tama didn't answer. He just smiled. Night brought a new kind of energy. The crowd thickened. Drinks flowed. People shouted to be heard over the bass. Tama wandered further, drawn by curiosity and rhythm. But freedom, he learned, could be sharp-edged. A group of older teens approached him. Friendly at first. Asked where he was from. Offered him a drink. Then another. He declined, but they pressed on. One grabbed his arm, laughing. But the grip was too tight. "Relax, little chief," the boy said, eyes glazed. Tama yanked himself free and ran, slipping into the crowd. Heart hammering. Breath shallow. He found a food stall. Stood there, trembling, pretending to study the menu. The vendor, an older man with gray dreads, looked at him. "You runnin' from trouble?" Tama didn't speak. The man handed him a bottle of water. "Stay close to the light, son." Tama nodded. The shadows didn't feel so free anymore. After the festival ended, the streets emptied fast. Tama and Manaya had no place to sleep. They tried to crash in the Uda, but the city patrols were strict. A security guard tapped the window with a torch. "Move along." They drove around for an hour before parking near a quiet marina. The waves slapped gently against the dock. Cold wind crept through the glass. Neither of them spoke. Thomas stared at the stars above the harbor. So many, so distant. He thought of home, of Nana's voice, of the woven tukutuku on his bedroom wall. He wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. But he wasn't sure he could stay here either. They made it as far as Palmerston North before it all unraveled. A routine checkpoint. Breath tests. License checks. Manaya's license had expired. The officer raised an eyebrow. Then saw Tama in the passenger seat.
Young. Quiet.
Nervous. "Where are you boys headed?" "Rotorua," Manaya muttered. The officer looked at Tama. "Parents know you're traveling?" Tama hesitated. And that was all it took. 10 minutes later, they were sitting on a bench outside a small station office. A constable dialed Tama's father.
Tama didn't speak.
Just stared at his shoes. When the officer handed him the phone, his father's voice was calm.
Too calm.
Come home, he said. No anger, just disappointment. Tama felt the weight of it like stones in his chest. The drive back to Rotorua was silent. Manaya had barely spoken since the checkpoint. He kept his eyes fixed on the road, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. There was no music, no jokes, just the low hum of the engine and the occasional chirp of roadside birds. Thomas stared out the window, watching the familiar trees rush past like ghosts. He didn't know what to expect at home. A shouting match? Weeks of punishment? Maybe even worse. When they finally pulled up outside the Raukra house, the front gate creaked in the wind. His father stood by the door, arms folded, eyes unreadable. Thomas stepped out of the Uda slowly, bag slung over one shoulder. His legs felt heavier than they had when he left. Manaya gave him a nod. No words, just a look that said, "Good luck, bro." Then he drove away. Tama approached the house. The front steps had never seemed so tall. When he reached the top, his father didn't move. "Inside," he said, voice steady. They sat in the kitchen. Steam rose from a freshly boiled kettle. The old clock on the wall ticked like a heartbeat. Then finally his father spoke. No lies, just truth. And Tama told him everything. From the moment he decided to leave.
To the reggae.
The running. The fear. The feeling of freedom. He expected rage. Instead, he got silence. And then, quietly, his father said, "You dishonored the house. But you found something. Now, what will you do with it?"